Mom stole my $45,000 401k to fund my sister's wedding, until the bank called me. My mother forged my signature to drain my 401k retirement account to pay for my younger sister's lavish wedding. She assumed that because we shared a last name, I would simply absorb the financial devastation and cover for her. But when the bank's fraud department called to report the suspicious activity, I didn't hesitate. I confirmed it was federal wire fraud. Here is the story of how my family's entitlement triggered a federal investigation, ruined a wedding, and finally set me free. My name is Victoria. I am 34 years old, and I work as a forensic accountant for a corporate firm in Boston. My entire career is built on tracking missing money, auditing financial discrepancies, and testifying in court against people who think they are smarter than the federal tax code. My family, however, never quite understood what I do. To my parents, I was just the boring daughter who played with spreadsheets. My sister, Qley, is 26. She has never held a job for more than a year, jumping from one passion project to the next while living rent-free in my parents' fully paid-off home. To say she is the golden child would be an understatement. She is the entire sun around which my parents orbit. I learned early on that my role in the family was to be self-sufficient so that all available emotional and financial resources could be funneled directly to Qley. I paid my own way through college, bought my own car, and aggressively funded my retirement accounts. By the time I was 30, I had built a solid, independent life. The breaking point began when Qley got engaged to a guy named Brad. Brad was a nice enough guy, but he came from a wealthy family, and Qley was obsessed with matching their lifestyle. She didn't just want a wedding. She wanted a spectacular, Instagram-worthy coronation. She booked a historic estate, hired a celebrity florist, and ordered a custom designer gown. The budget quickly spiraled past $90,000. My parents took out a home equity line of credit to pay for the deposits, but they quickly ran out of cash. That is when I was summoned to a family dinner. "Victoria," my mother said, pouring me a glass of cheap wine while Qley scrolled through her phone. "We're in a bit of a bind with the caterer and the floral designer. We need $45,000 by the end of the month to secure them." I took a sip of my wine. "That sounds incredibly stressful. Have you considered scaling down? A backyard wedding can be beautiful." My mother laughed, a sharp, dismissive sound. "Don't be ridiculous. The invitations are already out. Brad's family expects a certain standard. We're hoping you could cover the $45,000. Consider it an early wedding gift to your sister." I stared at her, genuinely thinking it was a joke. "Mom, I don't have $45,000 just sitting in a checking account to give away." "You have your retirement accounts," she shot back, her tone shifting from sweet to demanding. "You've been hoarding money in that 401k since you were 22. There has to be hundreds of thousands in there. You can just withdraw it. You have plenty of time to build it back up. Qley only gets married once." I felt the familiar, cold knot in my stomach, the realization that they didn't see me as a daughter, but as a financial contingency plan. "Absolutely not," I said, my voice eerily calm. "A 401k isn't a piggy bank. If I make an early withdrawal, I get hit with a 10% penalty from the IRS, plus federal and state income taxes. I would lose almost half of it just to hand you the cash. I am not setting my future on fire to pay for centerpieces." The argument that followed was explosive. Qley cried and accused me of being jealous of her happiness. My mother called me a selfish, cold-hearted spinster who cared more about numbers than her own flesh and blood. My father told me I was a disappointment. I stood up, grabbed my coat, and walked out. For 2 months, they gave me the silent treatment. I assumed they had figured out another way to finance the circus. I was wrong. It was a Tuesday morning, right in the middle of tax season. I was sitting at my desk reviewing a corporate audit when my phone rang. The caller ID showed Vanguard Trust, the financial institution that managed my 401k. "Am I speaking with Victoria Evans?" the voice asked. It was a representative from the Vanguard Fraud Prevention Division. "Speaking," I replied, instantly alert. "Ms. Evans, We are calling to verify a hardship withdrawal request submitted yesterday for the amount of $45,000. The funds were requested to be wired to a First National Credit Union account ending in 4402. My blood ran ice cold. The credit union account ending in 4402 was a joint account my mother and I had opened when I was 18, so she could transfer me grocery money during my freshman year of college. I hadn't used it in over a decade, but technically, her name was still on it. Can you tell me how this request was submitted? I asked, pulling up my work software to start recording my own notes. We received a physical hardship distribution form via overnight mail. It included a copy of your Social Security card, your birth certificate, and a notarized signature. However, our automated system flagged the transaction because the wire destination had been inactive for over 10 years, and the IP address used to log into your account to initiate the paperwork generation originated from a device not associated with your profile. My mother, she had kept copies of my vital documents in her old filing cabinet. She had guessed my security questions, probably things like my first pet or maternal grandmother's maiden name, logged in, printed the form, and forged my signature. Ms. Evans, the agent asked, "Did you authorize this distribution?" For 10 seconds, I sat in absolute silence. The emotional gravity of the moment felt like a physical weight pressing on my chest. This was my mother. If I said no, I knew exactly what would happen. I knew the federal banking laws. I knew the penalties. A part of me, the little girl who just wanted her mother to love her as much as she loved Qley, screamed at me to just say yes, to fix it, to protect them. But then I thought about the 12 years of 60-hour work weeks, the vacations I didn't take so I could max out my contributions, the absolute disdain in my mother's voice when she told me my future was expendable for Qley's party. No, I said, my voice steady and resolute. I did not authorize this transaction. That is a forged document. I am the victim of identity theft. The agent's tone shifted from customer service to strictly procedural. Thank you for confirming. Ms. Evans, we are freezing the account immediately. We will not process the wire, because this involves an ERISA-regulated federal retirement account and wire fraud across state lines. We are required by law to escalate this to federal authorities and the IRS. You will need to file a police report. I understand, I replied. Send me the copies of the forged documents. I will handle the police report on my end today. When the documents arrived in my secure email portal an hour later, I felt a wave of pure disgust. Not only had my mother flawlessly forged my signature, but the document was stamped by a notary public. I recognized the name immediately. Brenda Hayes, my mother's best friend from her weekly book club. Brenda had illegally notarized a forged document without the signatory present, committing a severe state offense. I didn't call my mother. I didn't scream or cry. I printed the Vanguard fraud report, the forged documents, and Brenda's notary stamp. I walked straight out of my office, drove to the local police precinct, and filed a comprehensive report for identity theft and attempted grand larceny. I gave the detective everything on a silver platter. 2 days later, on a Thursday evening, I drove to my parents' house. The driveway was full of cars. Qley was apparently having a dress fitting with her bridesmaids. I walked through the front door without knocking. The living room was a sea of white tulle and champagne flutes. My mother was standing by the fireplace, looking incredibly stressed but putting on a fake smile for the guests. When she saw me, her smile vanished. She marched over to me, grabbing my arm and pulling me into the kitchen away from the bridesmaids. "What are you doing here?" she hissed. "You've ignored us for 2 months, and now you show up and ruin the mood?" I pulled my arm away and dropped the police report and the Vanguard fraud documents onto the kitchen island. Why did Vanguard call me on Tuesday about a $45,000 withdrawal, Mom? Her face went pale, then instantly flooded with a defensive, angry red. She looked at the papers, but didn't touch them. "We had to. Victoria, the caterer was threatening to cancel. It's just a loan. We were going to pay you back with the cash gifts from the wedding. You weren't even using the money. Why are you making such a big deal out of this?" You are so dramatic. I am dramatic? I repeated, letting out a harsh, disbelief-filled laugh. Mom, you didn't borrow money. You committed federal wire fraud. You stole my social security number. You forged my signature on federal tax documents. And you involved Brenda, who committed notary fraud. Qley walked into the kitchen, struggling to hold up the heavy skirts of her dress. Can you guys stop yelling? I'm trying to get pinned. Victoria, if you're just here to be toxic about money again, leave. I'm not here to be toxic, Qley, I said, looking at my sister. I'm here to tell you that your wedding is canceled. Excuse me, Qley snapped. The bank flagged the transaction. I looked back at my mother. I told them it was fraud. I filed a police report. Vanguard's fraud division has already contacted the IRS because attempting to manipulate a 401k triggers an automatic federal review. My mother grabbed the counter, looking as if the floor had dropped out from beneath her. You called the police on your own mother? Over money we were going to put back. You didn't just try to steal my money, I said, my voice echoing in the quiet kitchen. You tried to steal my security. If that transaction had gone through, I would have owed the IRS over $15,000 in early withdrawal penalties and taxes next April. Would you have paid that, Mom? No, you would have left me to drown. You have to call them back. My mother's voice was shaking now, tears welling in her eyes. Call the bank. Tell them it was a misunderstanding. Tell the police you made a mistake. Victoria, you can't do this to me. I didn't do anything to you. I just refused to be your victim, I said, picking up my keys. It's out of my hands now. It's a federal investigation. You should probably use whatever money you have left to hire a very good defense attorney. I walked out of the house and never looked back. The fallout was catastrophic, exactly as my actuarial brain knew it would be. Because the attempted wire transfer involved an active federal investigation. My mother's bank froze all of her assets, including the joint accounts she shared with my father. They had no access to cash. When the final deposit checks for the wedding venue and the caterer bounced, the vendors canceled everything. Qley's dream wedding evaporated overnight. When Brad's family found out about the criminal investigation for fraud and identity theft, they demanded Brad call off the engagement. He didn't even fight them on it. He packed his bags and left Qley 2 weeks before the date they were supposed to walk down the aisle. Brenda lost her notary license and was charged with official misconduct. She immediately turned state's witness against my mother to avoid jail time. My parents are currently facing massive fines, a grueling IRS audit, and probation. They had to sell the house they lived in just to cover their legal fees. My mother tried to send me a letter a few months ago. She wrote about forgiveness, about how family is supposed to stick together through hard times, about how I had broken her heart. I didn't even open it completely. I just handed it to my lawyer to add to the restraining order file. I started going to therapy shortly after the incident. Dr. Evans, my therapist, asked me in our 3rd session if I felt guilty about destroying my family. I didn't destroy them, I told her, looking out the window at the Boston skyline. They built a house out of matches and demanded I set myself on fire to keep them warm. I just put the matches away. Today, my 401k is perfectly intact, securely locked behind new 2-factor authentication and a completely new social security profile. I bought myself a beautiful townhouse. I spend my holidays with friends who celebrate my successes instead of looking for ways to exploit them. My family thought the ultimate rule was that family won't sue. But the real ultimate rule is one I learned from my job. The numbers never lie. And the truth is, the cost of keeping toxic people in your life is the only debt you can never afford to pay.